Imagine a young man, a beloved heir to the most powerful empire on earth, welcomed by the people as a hero and a new hope. But within a few short months, a sudden, near-fatal illness completely shatters his mind. He descends into a world of paranoia, sadism, and cruelty, turning a golden age of peace into a reign of terror. This isn't a fictional tale. This is the true story of Caligula, a Roman emperor whose name became synonymous with madness. His reign descended into chaos, marked by extravagant excess, strange decrees, and acts so cruel that they remembered for centuries. Was he truly a madman, drunk on power? Or was he the victim of an elaborate smear campaign by his enemies? Some claimed his mind broke after a sudden illness. Others whispered he was always destined for darkness. Whatever the truth, the name Caligula became a symbol of absolute power, gone terrifyingly wrong. For 2 decades, Rome had been ruled by Emperor Tiberius, a monarch so paranoid and reclusive that he governed from the isolated island of Capri. His reign marked by a series of treason trials that sent a shiver through the city's elite. But as his long, dark rule drew to a close, the people's hopes turned to a new heir, a young man who represented a future of peace, prosperity, and renewed glory. This was Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, the son of the revered general Germanicus. He was born in the year 12 AD into one of the most influential families in Rome. His father, Germanicus, was a celebrated general, adored by the people and respected by the legions. His mother, Agrippina the Elder, was the granddaughter of Augustus himself, the founder of the Roman Empire. From birth, Gaius was surrounded by the weight of history and the expectation of greatness. But his childhood was far from peaceful. The imperial court was a place of constant intrigue, where loyalty could shift in an instant and ambition often ended in blood. He spent his childhood in military camps, a kind of living mascot to his father's legions. It was here that the soldiers, with affection, gave him a nickname that would follow him forever: Caligula, which means little boots, a nod to the miniature military uniform he wore. It was a term of affection then, but one he would grow to despise. This childhood earned him an immense and lasting popularity with the army, a powerful bond that would prove instrumental in his rise to power. The people loved him, not just for his charismatic personality, but for what he was not. He was not Tiberius. As a young man, he was known for his charm and intelligence, and his reputation spread throughout the empire. Tragedy struck early. In 19 AD, Germanicus died suddenly under suspicious circumstances. Many believed he had been poisoned on the orders of the Emperor Tiberius, who saw Germanicus as a threat. The loss devastated the family and left Agrippina and her children vulnerable. Over the years, political purges and accusations would destroy most of Caligula's family, leaving him as one of the few survivors. By his teenage years, Caligula had learned to hide his true thoughts behind a mask of obedience. He lived under the watchful eye of Emperor Tiberius, a ruler feared for his paranoia and cruelty. Historians say that in those years, Caligula became a master of survival, studying the emperor's moods, saying only what was necessary, and quietly absorbing the lessons of absolute power. When Tiberius finally died in 37 AD, The Senate and the people turned to Caligula as a breath of fresh air. Young, charismatic, and bearing the legacy of Germanicus, the Roman Senate declared Caligula as the sole emperor. When Caligula first took the throne in March of 37 AD, Rome erupted in joy. After years under the cold and reclusive Tiberius, the people welcomed their young emperor with open arms. The Senate praised him. The Praetorian Guard swore loyalty without hesitation. The people filled the streets with chants of Gaius Caesar. For a brief moment, it seemed Rome had found the ruler it deserved. Caligula's first 7 months as emperor lived up to every expectation. He began his reign with a series of popular reforms that immediately won the hearts of the people and the respect of the Senate. He publicly abolished the treason trials that had plagued his predecessor's rule and burned the records of his reign, a symbolic gesture of a new era of freedom. He pardoned those who had been exiled, reduced unfair taxes, and sponsored lavish gladiatorial games and public feasts that delighted the masses. The Roman people believed they had found their hero, a true son of Rome who would lead them into a golden age. He was everything they had hoped for, a young and vibrant ruler with a promising future. But as with all mysteries, a sudden and unexplained change was on the horizon. The golden age of Caligula was about to come to a shocking and terrifying end. The whispers of hope and celebration would soon be replaced by cries of terror and the silence of the grave, and the story of the golden boy of Rome would take a chilling turn into darkness. The promise of a golden age was a fragile thing, and in the late autumn of 37 AD, it shattered completely. In October of that same year, only 7 months into his reign, the beloved Emperor Caligula fell gravely ill. The nature of this disease has been lost to history, a medical mystery that historians and doctors have debated for centuries. Some believe it was encephalitis, a severe inflammation of the brain, which could explain the radical changes in his personality. Other theories suggest a case of lead poisoning, or even a form of hyperthyroidism or epilepsy, conditions known to affect mood and behavior. The entire empire waited in breathless suspense, praying for the recovery of their young hero. For weeks, he lay on the brink of death. But just when it seemed all hope was lost, Caligula made a miraculous recovery. The city of Rome celebrated with public sacrifices and lavish games. Yet, the man who emerged from his sickbed was not the same person who had fallen ill. Historians note a clear shift. His generosity gave way to suspicion. His charm began to twist into cruelty. What had once been political shrewdness became a hunger for absolute control. Whether the illness damaged his mind or simply revealed his true nature, from this point on, the benevolent ruler was gone, replaced by a cruel, paranoid, and erratic tyrant. The transformation was so profound and so sudden that his contemporaries and later historians have often attributed it to a descent into madness. Caligula began to see himself as a living god, not just a ruler, but a divine being on earth. He demanding to be worshipped by the Roman people. This new Caligula was plagued by his own mind. He also suffered from severe insomnia, often unable to sleep for more than a few hours a night, and was tormented by strange, terrifying dreams. He would spend his sleepless nights pacing the long corridors of his palace, calling out for the dawn. The people of Rome watched in horror as their heroes spiraled into depravity. his actions became increasingly bizarre and sadistic. He began to humiliate and execute those who had been close to him, including members of his own family. The golden age that had seemed so certain was now just a distant memory, replaced by a reign of terror that no one could have predicted. The emperor had gone from being a savior to a sadist, leaving Rome to wonder what had truly happened to the man known as Little Boots. The man who once walked among his soldiers in little boots now saw himself as far above mortal men. The transformation that had begun with his illness now reached its full, terrifying conclusion. Caligula became a living deity, and he governed with the capricious cruelty of a divine being with no one to answer to. His immense spending drained the state's treasury, which he used not for the good of Rome, but for his own extravagant and often bizarre projects. Lavish feasts were held where entire fortunes were spent in a single night, and ships were transformed into floating palaces for his amusement. His cruelty was no longer a matter of private paranoia. It became a public spectacle. He humiliated senators and high-ranking officials, forcing them to run for miles alongside his litter and subjecting them to his brutal wit and sarcasm in public. His most famous, and perhaps most misunderstood act, was his alleged plan to appoint his favorite horse, Incitatus, as a consul. While many have seen this as the ultimate proof of his madness, some historians believe it was a calculated insult to the Roman Senate. By suggesting that a horse was more worthy of the highest political office than a senator, Caligula was demonstrating the Senate's utter powerlessness and his own contempt for their institution. He enjoyed toying with the lives of those around him. Gladiators fought not for sport, but for his private entertainment.
Yes, fight for me!
His sadism was a chilling feature of his reign. He would reportedly torture and execute people on a whim, sometimes for little more than his own amusement. The Roman historian Suetonius wrote that Caligula even wished the Roman people had just one neck, so he could decapitate them all at once. He would invite fathers to dinner and then have their sons brutally killed, sometimes forcing the fathers to watch before he had them executed as well. He was completely unpredictable, and the city lived in a state of constant, suffocating terror. No one, not even his closest advisors, could tell what would set him off next. In his mind, he was untouchable, destined for immortality. He ordered a bridge of ships to be built across the Bay of Baiae, claiming he had conquered the sea itself. He paraded across it in armor, comparing himself to the great conquerors of history. Rome watched in disbelief but also in silence, because by now, opposing Caligula was not just dangerous, it was fatal.
Run, my brave protectors! Run for your emperor!
The boy who had once been the empire's hope had become its darkest shadow. By 41 AD, Rome was holding its breath. The Senate feared him, and the Praetorian Guards, his own protectors, had grown restless. Even within the imperial palace, whispers of conspiracy grew louder. Caligula's cruelty had crossed every boundary. Senators were executed over insults, and wealthy citizens were accused of treason so their estates could be seized. The Praetorians themselves were publicly humiliated. His disregard for everyone but himself had reached a climax. He was not just a political threat to the state. He had become a personal menace to the lives of every Roman noble. The fear he created, along with his blatant self-indulgence, set the stage for a final desperate act from those who had once hailed him as a hero. The air in Rome had become thick with a sense of dread and mounting desperation. Caligula's tyranny had grown so extreme that it was no longer just political discontent. It was a matter of survival. This created a powerful, silent consensus among the city's elite that he had to be stopped. The plot to assassinate him was not the work of one person, but a desperate coalition of officers in his own Praetorian Guard, key senators, and even some of his courtiers. They were no longer motivated by a desire for power, but by a fear for their own lives and the stability of the empire. The central figure in the conspiracy was Cassius Chaerea, a tribune of the Praetorian Guard. Caligula had a particular and sadistic fondness for publicly taunting Chaerea, mocking his squeaky and unmanly voice, and even giving him effeminate passwords. This constant humiliation fueled Chaerea's hatred and solidified his resolve. He decided that the humiliation must end with a blade. He was joined by others who had been similarly slighted or feared for their safety. The conspirators chose their moment with cold, ruthless precision. On January 24, 41 AD, Caligula was attending a series of public games on the Palatine Hill. As he made his way through a narrow, secluded corridor on his way to the baths, the assassins moved in. Chaerea struck the first blow. A swift stab to the neck. The attack was a chaotic, brutal ambush. Caligula, who was unarmed and surrounded, was quickly overwhelmed. More blades followed, each one ending the reign that had plunged Rome into chaos. He was stabbed a reported 30 times, with the conspirators taking their time to ensure he was truly dead. The very guards who were meant to protect him were now the instruments of his violent end. But the assassins were not content with just the emperor's death. In a chilling act of finality, they also hunted down and killed his wife, Milonia Caesonia, and his young daughter, Julia Drusilla. This was not an act of blind rage. It was a cold, calculated move to prevent any potential avengers from rising to power and continuing his bloodline. The murder of the emperor and his family in one single bloody act marked the end of his short and terrifying reign. The man who had once been the empire's golden boy lay on the cold stone floor, lifeless. Some historians say was a deliberate echo of the murder of Caligula's own great-great-grandfather, Julius Caesar, bringing the narrative of Roman power full circle, from one fatal betrayal to another. With Caligula's bloody body left behind in the palace corridor, his short, terrifying reign came to an end. The news was met with a mixture of relief and chaos. The Senate, which had lived in terror for years, was now faced with a fundamental choice. Should they restore the Republic or choose a new emperor? They ultimately chose the latter. But the brutal, unpredictable nature of Caligula's reign left an indelible mark on history. Power, once centralized, rarely returns to the people. In the chaos that followed, his uncle Claudius was plucked from hiding by the Praetorian Guard and declared the new ruler. Centuries have passed since Caligula's blood stained the stones of Rome, yet his shadow still looms over history. The immediate accounts of his life, written by contemporaries like Suetonius and Tacitus, paint a picture of a man who was unambiguously mad. His wild spending, bizarre acts, and extreme cruelty were all presented as symptoms of a profound mental and moral decay. But a nagging question remains. Were these accounts entirely accurate, or were they a form of historical revisionism? Was he truly the embodiment of evil, driven by madness and bloodlust, or was he a victim of propaganda? Ultimately, we are left with questions that will never be fully answered. Was Caligula a victim of an illness that shattered his mind? Or was he a tyrant born of a system that gave one man absolute power? Perhaps the most chilling possibility is both, that a fragile mind, given limitless authority, became the greatest terror of all. His body was buried hastily, but his shadow remained. The man once called Little Boots, who walked in innocence among soldiers, became one of history's darkest rulers. The echo of his reign never truly fades. In the annals of history, his name remains etched in the same breath as the empire he ruled, a permanent and terrifying reminder that some of the greatest mysteries are not of what happened, but of what goes on inside the human mind. And maybe, just maybe, in the cold silence of Rome's ancient stones, the whispers of Caligula's reign still linger, a reminder that a crown can sometimes weigh heavier than the man who wears it, and power itself can be the most dangerous madness of all.